Good afternoon and welcome to this, the 8th Berwick Literary Festival. So we're coming to the end of our 4th day. It's been a remarkable festival, but we still have some very good things for you this afternoon. I am Michael Gallico. I am the chair of the steering group that organises this festival. And on behalf of all my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you here today to Berwick. You've just seen the pictures, it's a stunning place, but also to this event. And if there are members of the Berwick Educational Association here, thank you for the Education Association's support. There's one little difference today. It did say in the opening slides that the Q&A function would be working. We are not having a Q&A session here. At the format of the event. And I think fair to say it is the people reading poetry who will be asking questions of us. Berwick is an unusual festival in that it is not a normal book festival, but it has always had a strong poetic stream in its programming. We celebrate words, written, spoken, and performed. And last night, for example, we were very fortunate. We had the poet laureate, Simon Armitage, speak to us, read to us from the stage of the Maltings, the town theatre. At the other end, we shall have a workshop for schools. Part of the festival's work is outreach for enrichment activity into schools. And later this month, we will be organising a poetry workshop by a young poet, Joseph Chelho, I hope I've got his name right there, which will be disseminated to the schools in Berwick and the area around. So it is entirely fitting that we welcome back Bloodaxe Books from the other end of the county of Northumberland. Bloodaxe has been a tremendous supporter of this festival. You may remember that last year we had the launch of the first reading from their anthology, Staying Human. And behind the screen today, we have two colleagues of mine, Colin and Kevin, who are probably some of the strongest advocates of poetry in the festival. And one day, perhaps we'll get them out from behind, in front of the camera. But I'm delighted now to introduce Neil Astley, who modestly describes himself as the editor of Bloodaxe Books. He is, of course, the founder. And to welcome back Davey Constantine, who read to us last year, and for the first time today, Heidi Williamson. And although she's not reading in person, extend a remote welcome to Tashani Doshi, who is going to read for us via a video recording. So overall, I think this session will last about 75 minutes. And so thank you for joining us today, Neil and everyone here, and for bringing us what is going to be a remarkable session. And now, Neil, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And we are delighted to be continuing this partnership with Berwick. So I'd like to welcome everyone in Berwick and everyone watching from everywhere else, this Bloodaxe Berwick event. The first poet who's going to read today is Heidi Williamson. Now, a dozen years ago or so, I gave a talk in Norwich to a writers group, including Heidi Williamson, on how to get your poetry published, emphasizing how difficult this is. Not to be deterred, Heidi took my advice, prepared the manuscript of her first collection and sent it to me. And I published that collection, Electric Shadow, in 2011. And it received a Poetry Book Society recommendation. Her second collection, The Print Museum, followed in 2016, and her third, Return by Minor Road, came out last year, recalling an earlier period in her life. In her mid-20s, Heidi was part of a Scottish community that suffered an inconceivable tragedy, the Dunblane Primary School shooting. Those years living in the town form the focus of her collection, Return by Minor Road. Through rivers, rain, wildlife, and landscape, she revisits where the occasional endures and discovers the healing properties of what was and still is a beloved place for her. So I'd now like to welcome Heidi Williamson.
Thank you, Neil, for that lovely introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I wish I could be in Berwick in person. And it's also such an honour to be reading with two poets whose work I admire immensely. As Neil said, I'm going to be reading from Return by Minor Road, which came out last year during lockdown. It focuses on my time living in Scotland. I moved there when I was 18 and I lived there until I was 30. Very, very formative, happy years for me. I went to university, I got married, I got my first job, and I made lifelong friends, and we go back regularly to visit. But as Neil said, in 1996, I was living in the small commuter town of Dunblane when a gunman entered the local primary school and opened fire on a class of 5 and 6-year-olds. I didn't have children then, but I had friends and colleagues whose children were shot. And when I was at the university, I worked as a cleaner, and without ever having met them, I'd actually cleaned the bedrooms of a couple of the children. So this book focuses on that time and how I carry it with me, but it also focuses on the beauty of the natural landscape there and how I carry that with me too. A language learned abroad. I also left a skin there, Louise Gluck, Cottonmouth country. Let the language of this land soften into your being. Counter its shifting lilt with a tilt of your own making. You can love what is not understood. In this place, they say, is that you? Are you away but? The language here leaves you drukit, soaked to the skin. Though you can never catch up what you say with what you mean. There are words for child and flight you can take in and wean. The wall. Nights you call out, I pad the hallway to your duvet flung wide, your leg dangling down, tender and crooked, still warm. Your small palm cooling on the wall. Your soft toys shift and slide as I cover you. My mind slides towards small absent ones I cared for in passing. Long ago, I glanced into the room of a girl who turned from the wall in sleep. Edging between the wall and the soft anchorage of my bed, I turn my bedspread back, lay hands along its length, see how awkwardly it rucks, how hard it is to settle. Loch occasional. Midwinter or spring, sometimes the Balvague floods Balquidder Glen, gives rise to a short-lived body. This uncommon water hosts fresh species that feed and breed there. Sculpin, caddisflies, pearl mussels. The flood may recede as rapidly as it arrived. Landslides may follow. This too opens up the canopies, the strata of soil. Buried nutrients, seeds, live plant matter is scattered. Silt beds down. The surface tension levels. The landscape is transformed again. Sudden creatures enrich the area or deplete it. Fragments enter the disturbed ground, waken. Spring or midwinter, at other times too, the silt of what happened rises and drops with the level of days. Sometimes it covers all daily tasks with an oily sheen that dimples when pressed, then releases the surface tension, the water's skin. Forced out to the edges of itself, all becomes water. It may recede, but the days are not transformed. The days are delayed, waiting for the water to come back, to scatter live matter back in its place. The occasional endures. The rain in the night. The past is falling on the house, lightly, insistently, with its own unnameable scent. I can't tell when the first mist of it began to drift down, lifting itself gently down. It wasn't there, and then it was, all around the house, moving across the roof with a patterning I couldn't recognize. In a way, there wasn't much of it, but such slivers bear down over time. The roof gradually succumbs to a fresh, deepening colour. The night insects bed down, out of the spattering. The wisteria darkens, drops petals. Even a light scattering leaves its mark in the morning, even if the surface dries. The soft past of rain has shaken itself on the house defenceless against its lightness. Fugitive dust. Child in the doorway who appears and disappears around the edge of my open book. How do you find me? The landing light stutters in your presence. The pale carpet shifts and shapes around your boneless toes. Child in the doorway who appears each evening without footsteps. I can hear you breathing. Still as a frame, you hold yourself up softly. Your clothes resist sight. Child in the doorway who appears, a creature or chrysalis of fugitive dust. Your presence fills my mouth with the tang of blood. I daren't move or swallow for fear you may withdraw. Child in the doorway who appears when the scent of wood smoke drifts onto the duvet, cautious as mist. Will you never step forwards? Hair. What if the dangerous thing actually happens and you're elsewhere looking away at a hair on the grass in the grounds of the offices? You're twirling the phone cord and listening, bored, to an advisor advise you on what's wrong with the mortgage application that shouldn't be wrong because you should know that the homeowner 3 is the wrong form for the wrong customer, and he's tired of doing your job for you. And the hair is as still as an eye, and the hair begins to flicker like a screen running out of power, and the hair against the grass becomes flat as a moment, like any terror you can fall through into the past. From the hallway, you can see into every corner of our small flat. From the kitchen window, the rose garden, the golf course, the Trossachs. From the bar, the Glen Roads, sky and sky framed. From tomorrow, all this will be different. Scottish spring. Here, now, it's cold and snowdrops have not yet seeded to daffodils. Elsewhere, it's warming, dimmer. Already the snowdrops are dropping. Now is the time when the world is blown open. Monochrome. The last time I saw you, really saw you, was in the office that day when the announcements started to come, but no one understood yet what had happened. You stood up, sharply pushed back your chair so it straggled across the passageway. Your tidy desk lay exposed to dust that would build between stacked papers. As you walked away, you were pale, your face open. I saw you again at the funeral, but couldn't see you, really, couldn't see anything. Not because of the tears, but the blankness my eyes and brain held, and my heart. It's true that the heart halts as it hurts on. I read you in the papers, friend. I see you and I read you, and I wish to hold your monochrome hand as it rests across that small child's head. Cold spring. A day like habit, unbroken. Our house on the hill, the pheasant, the Siamese, the ducks, breeze blocks painted over, a cupboard from hell, coat rack, junk store, circular window. Ice stumbling from inside the window panes. The path loch still. Watching the birds above, the clouds, the wind, all. The bridge, the river. Flexi time, clock in, mugs, cups, coffee run, coats steaming, eyes, nose streaming, folders out, earphones on, files, notes, pen, switch, screen. Welcome, detail. Manager says, incident. No one moment with another, frozen, unaware, a falling, order unfurled of meaning, shut down, shared out, astray, happening to, unexpected, unprepared, nothing to prevent. Those moments when the children you know, you think, are still, there is none, there is none. A hair's breadth, a single hair on there. No. Incoherent bystander. Midday, home, whole country, calling black words strung between mobile masts. The name of our place, repeated until you want to jolt awake, you want. All falls, through, against, around, beyond, all falls, broken. There is a crying that is bone. Calls. You're there, the voice says, then halts. What else to say? Yes, we're here. I nod, I carry on nodding at the white plastic handset, the slab of the base, the cord twisting away through the wires to everywhere else. What else to say? We're here, where the news is, where the day won't stop, where the phone keeps ringing late into the evening. Each time the same redundant speech, the same necessary reaching. We couldn't get through. I cup the earpiece against my skull, the mouthpiece against my cheek. It warms with contact. I know, I say eventually, and it means all it means. After. We're all living in after, Manisa Alvi. We go to the pub we always go to. Blair, the barman, is there, the locals and the Sky News reporters asking everyone to comment. We hesitate at the door, not because we don't want to talk, though we don't, only pausing outside a few moments. Blair beckons us over, serves us, and I stretch my hand over his, an instant longer, paying. He lets it stay, nods and looks away, and we find our quiet table. Demayat. Some days we cried ourselves out, packed our coats and climbed the soggy rock to its small summit. There was something about stepping one by one beside each other, without speaking, without the need. At the summit, we kept numb vigil for what we couldn't say. We descended in mist, our blurry outlines mottling together. On spring days now, when cold tips the hills, I can still see its cairn and trig point, the chopped obelisk at its peak, distant sheepfolds, memorials of snow. Balquhidder. After the bumpy, miles-long track, we stored ourselves in a far cottage beyond water. Small dogs visited us and scurried something solemn out the door with them. Thin place, where heaven and the afterlife lie close to the surface of the day. I bathed and slept and cried. You walked. We were colder than we'd ever been, despite the fire. Even when I watched smoke chugging slowly from our own chimney that day, I couldn't connect. Were we smoke? Were we cold? Were we left? When we were stone, we were fine-grained, sedimentary, Our bedding planes were fissile. We slept at the bottom of a river. When it dried, we basked. When it froze, we waited. The stars were further when we saw them through water. The river's bed near buried us. Its silt suppressed or collided against us. Over the years, how worn we grew. So many elements fused between. The fish eyed us with suspicion, and when we drained in the sun, dragonflies alighted on us, as if we would always be there. Culvert. My unassuming heart became a valley, amassing waters and debris, a vehicle for rain, dashing down the sides in emergency freefall. It isn't true to say that the valley gloved the heart. It was the heart, rent in the same way a clearing is made by great and incremental incidents. Partly, the valley remains visible beneath land that's been cleared for new lives and families. Its pulse ebbs in culverts beneath neat estates. A furtive love trickling deeper and deeper. Smoke. This time of year, smoke renews. From bonfires in unseen gardens, it flows grey-green across boundaries. My son is green in his knowledge, his uniform green, his love green-grey as unboundaried smoke. This time of year, his growth renews, just as autumn is throwing out hers. Done with spring, summer, done with holding up all those leaves, done holding on to each tiny seed. Smoke needn't be a warning. It can be an invitation. The homestead is within your scent. The hero in this poem throws invisible smoke bombs to exit a room mysteriously. From the school gates, I spy him on the open field, then he's gone. And I'll finish with the last poem in the book, Place. When we left it all. The hazel, the spruce, the Scots pine, the aspen. When we left, we took it all. The skyscapes and treescapes framing each season. When we left it all. The bracken, the cabins, the pathways of water. When we left, we took it all. The hollows, chill soil, ice air and snowfall. When we left it all. Angular boulders with ashy thin grasses. When we left, we took it all. Scent of just rained on, expanding the stonework. When we left it all. Pine martens, red deer, herons and osprey. When we took it all. Broadening rain clouds, blending with hillsides. When we left it all. Short-lived, supple islands of shingle. When we took it all. The bend in the loch, we can't see beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for that beautiful, powerful reading, which clearly was even more poignant in the light of Friday's events. I'd now like to introduce Davey Constantine. He was one of the first poets to be published by Bloodaxe over 40 years ago when he lived in Durham. He was then a lecturer in German at Durham University, and he went on to lecture in German at Oxford. He's published 11 books of poetry, 5 translations, and a novel with Bloodaxe. He's a noted translator of the poetry of Goethe, Hölderlin, and Brecht. His collected poems came out in 2004 and was followed by 3 later collections, the newest of which is his 11th collection, Belongings, which came out last year, which you'll be reading from. David's poetry is informed by a profoundly humane vision of the world. His title, Belongings, signals that these are poems concerned with our possessions and with what possesses us, with where we belong. Another kind of belonging is also challenged, our relationship with the planet to which we belong, but which does not belong to us. So I'm very pleased to introduce Davey Constantine, who's in Oxford today. We're ready for you, David.
I'm there.
Yes, you're with us now.
Good. Can you see?
Yes. So over to you.
You're still on screen now. Okay, I'll read from Belongings. The first poem I'll read is called My Friend's Belongings, and the person in question is a refugee friend of mine from Syria. In his mother tongues, or even in Turkish, Russian, Ukrainian, he would not struggle as he does in mine after 7 years here and far out of harm's way to get across to me his lost belongings. The tongues he is fluent in are the tongues of before. English is after. He shows me the palms of his hands as though what he had and held were still apparent there. He has what we call an open face. He has tears in his eyes. He shrugs, and as though weighed down by what he cannot show me, his lifted hands fall back upon the tabletop. On a good day, he will search for the words on his phone: olive tree, fountain, racing pigeon, and sometimes pictures. But as to pictures, I am wary since the bad day when without a word he pushed into my sight and forever into my head what they did, laughing in his country to a 12-year-old. Such things lodge now in the top stratum of his belongings. He wakes sweating and screaming out of the old nightmares and feels in the darkness for his phone, which faithfully supplies him with stuff from home for the new. How he struggles to excavate his buried treasures. In his mother tongue, he cannot find the words, but I know on good days that he wants to prove to me back then his circumstances were very different. And I do believe that he cultivated his garden, launched beautiful canny pigeons into the clear skies, was hospitable to friends and the stranger at the door. And what God put into his hands, far more than a tithe of it, he passed on to the needy. He calls me brother. He does not begrudge me my belongings. The cover of the book is a geological map of the Salford and Manchester area. It's a drift map, that is to say, most of what is coloured in various colours shows you what is actually there visible. And to find the solid rock, you have to go to cuttings, in this case, a railway cutting, and look for it there. Two words, arbor vitae, occur at the end of the poem, and that's the scientific word for the back of the neck, where the brain, actually the brain itself at the back there, has the appearance of a tree with many branches, the tree of life. Red. On my geological map of Manchester, the drift edition of 1949, most is washed over in a faint blue or a faint pink, for the boulder clay and the glacial sand and gravel travelled down from the Lake District. Also, much faded sepia for the alluvial terraces along our soiled river. I wanted outcrops, faces, daylight apparitions of the city's bedrock. And it took a while of pouring till I found a small, dull smear denoting Bunter sandstone. Then I walked fast to the locus itself, a railway cutting behind the hospital I was born in. Stood looking, nothing bright about it. It was soot black. Touched it, black on my fingers. Still, I believed in it, the red from the era of the greatest extinction. Yes, after my fashion, I saw the bright red in there, waiting. And I believe it was that moment of a boy staring for the red stone through the soot in a railway cutting close to home that drove me again and again to the uplands between the conurbations, the white peak and the dark, on paths as many as those that crisscross your palms or climb the arbor vitae in your head, or to all your body's provinces feed the blood. That's one place I think I still belong in lots of ways. And I'm understanding the word belongings there, again, as Neil suggested, as things that become important to you also in certain places and that you carry with you for the rest of your life. We're lucky enough to lease a house from the Duchy of Cornwall on Briar in the Isles of Scilly, and immediately underneath our front room, our bedroom window, the sound flows between Tresco and Briar. So you can look through the window and see the boats, the small boats and the big boats actually sometimes passing. This is a poem called For the Love of It. Black hull, 2 brick red sails, full tide, not 6 o'clock yet on the soft breath of a southerly. Under the clearing sky, the first small boat puts out down the quiet sound towards the continuous melee of the whole Atlantic. You know this room. At midsummer, very early, how the sun slants in and over the watcher's shoulder flames up silver in the seahorse looking glass, and rising angles down across the dark blue length and breadth of the waking sleeper's bed. I see them side by side, standing quiet. They can handle their craft and read the charts and perhaps the stars, and know the one thing certain about the weather is that it's changeable. And look, red sails, black hull, solely for the love they put out into an ocean, for the risky love of it. There's a pub in Penzance where we often have to stay on the way down to Scilly, which on Sundays runs an open mic, not for poetry, but for music. And I wandered in there once. The phrase in this needs perhaps a word of explanation, is lacrimae rerum, a Latin tag from the Aeneid, actually, and it means simply the tears of things, and it's the way when looking or remembering things that have events, particularly that human beings have been involved in, places where they've been, the tears of things, the tears you might feel for those events or places, as it were, surface. Open mic. Sundays, 3 to 7, the dead time, is open mic here. 25 slots in the dark side room where the piano stands and the posters, some big names from way back hang, and all the old guitars. Few on in the first half stay till the interval, and few on in the second turn up before it. So there's never a crowd, never more than a handful, to be honest. In fact, the last slot tends to entertain itself. True, there's always 2 or 3 regulars at the bar, but by that time they'll be the worse for wear and not paying attention. Bill himself does the intros. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the legendary, the one and only. But while they're doing their best in the time allowed them, he'll be playing Patience in his cubbyhole. Me, I'm fond of Elaine. And now, says our compere, to tickle the ivories, a big hand for the lovely Elaine. I could kill the bastard for that. His piano's never been even half in tune. I feel for her, how she bows so low over the keys, you'd say she must be hearing something nobody else can hear. I clap like mad, I don't care who knows. Last Sunday, a man from not round here blew in. He wore a red cap and sat at the bar with a packet of crisps and a pint of Bombardier. The show was nearly over. You'd have thought in all his born days he'd never seen anything like it. Got off his stool and moved in closer and closer. And now, said Bill, last but very much not least, put your hands together for 3 for the price of 1. Fran, ukulele, Carol, bless her, the vocals, Jimmy, the beast between 2 beauties, horn. It was Carol the stranger fixed on. She sings with her eyes shut, and over the years, her voice has dropped a floor or 2. That sound. We had a vicar in once. He covered his ears. She sang a Tom Waits number, Cold, Cold Ground. And then, with a smile, to cheer you up, here's one of my own. The man in the red cap couldn't take his eyes off her. And when she'd done, he stood there quite alone, crying, bravo. Took his empty glass to the bar. Good night, he said to me. Then, lacrimae rerum. Brave name for a band, that, said Carol when I told her. Hey, Fran, hey, Jimmy, lacrimae rerum. Change our name and up our game. Whatever, said Fran. You're the boss, Carol, said Jimmy. Gone 7, the crowd were arriving. Bill went back behind the bar where he belongs to be. The serious drinking starts as the last open mic lot are leaving. The next poem is called I Will Hold You in the Light. We had a very dear friend who not died very long ago, who was a Quaker socialist. Rare word nowadays, actually. Absent completely, I think, in America, and not very strong here anymore. Scylla Farmer, she was called. And when I first moved to Durham, almost the first thing I got involved in, apart from teaching, was trying with Scylla and a couple of other things to ascertain how many men were sleeping rough in derelict properties in the city. We went out with a torch through these appalling places and ascertained the number. when Scylla died, Helen, my wife, remembered that one of her phrases, in fact, the phrase really that I should also remember, was precisely, "I will hold you in the light." It's a farewell saying. Between long absences, having met again, taking her leave, she would say, "I will hold you in the light," and has gone now where there's none. So for the time allowed, we shall hold her in our light. More of the dark will come in if we let her go. And there's already too much of the dark where we are now. Fit to be looked at, that is what one wants to be. Fit to be seen in the light of a friend's thinking. And she always did have a look that inquired in a friendly fashion, "How are you doing in the things that need to be done? How have you been getting on with those things since I saw you last?" And asked to be looked at herself like that. I remember watching my mother or her mother darn or sew, and that if I stood watching too close, she would say to me, "You're in my light, love, I can't see." And remember also that if ever I came with a thing needing seeing to or putting right, either one of the women would say, "Bring it here, love, into the light." Our dead, though their company grows, are not in our light. We see better for them, and holding them in the light, see better what needs to be done or mended and how. This one's called Dancer. This 5-year-old dancing to the music of a man who died a long, long time ago. When I tell her she is very graceful, she nods as though to say, "You don't need to tell me that," and goes on dancing, not knowing, and nor would it interest her to learn what kind of grace I'm telling her she has. For it isn't that of the music, nor a matter of whether she keeps time or not. The man who made the music and died too young was a child to the bitter end. And I think he'd have loved almost as much as I do the way her right sock will keep coming down and how, pulling it up again, she jigs on her left foot without a smile. Her grace is a serious matter, but as if through the eyes of the old mask, through eons of tears, broke such jolly tunes the celestial bodies skipped and skated. Her time's not exactly his, but nor does she use his music merely for her back cloth. It's more a place and her way of being in that place, free to keep what time she likes. So I think Lilith danced in Eden, and the flames and waters of the earth, the trees, the stones, and all kinds of other living things in a solemn gaiety danced their own dances with her. And it's true, child, you don't need me telling you you're graceful. The words, 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 you're lighter without them. Neil mentioned Hölderlin, whom I've been translating for decades and decades, and he was himself a great, rather idiosyncratic, eccentric translator, but a scholar of Greek, and he did translations of the whole of Sophocles' Antigone and Oedipus. There's a chorus in Antigone which he translated in a way which for its time was extremely odd. He uses the word ungeheuer. The Greek is daina, which means possibly terrible, but also remarkable, extraordinary. The German word ungeheuer actually means more monstrous, something that you're not likely to be able to get on with very easily. I translated that as monstrous, and I've done this translation, I suppose 2 or 3 times now, radicalizing it each time to deal, I think, more and more closely with the state we are actually in by the doings of this monster man. Monstrous, a lot, but nothing so monstrous as man. For he, unkind to his own kind, inducting them young into dealing and war, dying, bequeathing them the developing curse of his enterprise on the earth, on the seas, and into the air he visits himself, at best in folly, but often with malice aforethought. Man, the wrong turning, who ordered the fire of the sun into the streets, the parks, and the schools of a town, and there in broad daylight cast people as lasting shadows, for him on whose brow is inscribed, "Beware, there is nothing I will not do." Why now should the warm-blooded dolphin, the smiling, the playful, the dancer, the maker of music, who ferried the singer Orion to safety, why now should this friend intercede? O man, the killer, who multiplies, who schemes in his sleep after ways of living forever, who smothered the law in his heart, in these days of the melting poles, of earthquake and flood, and the cavalry charge of the tides, he knows it now, the law, by virtue of having transgressed, and will stand on the shore as the leaden waves for his comfort deliver him carrion, starfish and whales. Oh, swiftly climbing and fouling the lovely curve of the sky, the infinite swarm of death will fall on his fields, and he will have nothing to answer, the child who asks, who are they passing on the last of the light? They are Persephone in rags, leading her blinded mother by the hand, seeking an entrance to preferable Hades. I'll finish with a poem that refers back to the first one I read in some ways, a poem called Carousel. Helen and I were in Basel. I was on a book tour. Basel's a posh and expensive place, and we were in a posh and expensive hotel put there by the organisers. But just across the road from that was an area of wasteland. It was a drizzly night in November, and on this wasteland every year a fair was allowed to put up, and it was crowded. It was densely crowded, mostly with immigrant spectators, immigrant workers and their children. Carousel. November, early dark, and in the drizzle, on wastelands strung with lights, the fair, and at the heart of it, in all the glare and roar, the tuneful, measured, anti-clockwise turning carousel, watchers encircling it. Here is a space to play at letting go, to try, having come thus far, how many seconds separation you can bear after the desert and the sea, after the ice, the hungering, the deaths, and too much entering through the eyes into the kitty of bad dreams. At last, they bid in this arena for another lease of trust, and watch their kids go half a revolution out of view, one sailing solo on a swan, and then two clutching tight on an elephant arrive and leave, and you can see they do not quite believe the looping tune will bring them back again to grown-ups so long at the world's mercy, without a tongue to plead, who stand now silent in a ring, and watch their flesh and blood within it orbiting, and wager all on a quaint machinery, and entertain the idea that in this pleasure ground, playing at severance is permissible, and that the ancient music is reliable, and keeping time against the clock will bring the children round, take and return the elephant and the swan, strew lost and found on that discouraged audience until they will believe it if the children will. You let us out of sight, and look, we come again. This travelling Babel, here 3 nights allowed to set up shot on out-of-town terrain. Blessed be the flare of it, blessed be the soft rain. So both the circles, those who stand and watch and those who ride, the friendly animals in a fairy tale, at every revolution on the fabulous flat earth, may see through rain and tears, beloved faces lit with mirth, haloed here and now and real. Thank you.
Nero, your mic's off.
Okay. Well, thank you, David, for that really powerful reading, the second of our really powerful readings today. We're now going to hear from Tashani Doshi. She's an award-winning poet and dancer of Welsh Gujarati descent. Her 4th book of poetry, A God at the Door, was published this April, and it's shortlisted for the 2021 Forward Prize for Best Collection, the winner of which will be announced next Sunday. Her debut collection, Countries of the Body, which came out in 2006, won the Forward Prize for Best First Collection, and it was followed by 2 other collections from Bloodaxe, Everything Begins Elsewhere in 2012, and Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods in 2018. Her other books include 2 novels from Bloomsbury. Her new collection, A God at the Door, spans time and space, drawing on the extraordinary minutiae of nature and humanity to elevate the marginalized. These poems, taken together, traverse history from the cosmic to the everyday. Her poetry employs beauty to heal trauma, enabling the voices of the oppressed to be heard with piercing clarity. She lives on a beach in India between 2 fishing villages in Tamil Nadu near Chennai with her husband and dogs, and she joins us from there, not live, but in a pre-recorded video. So we're now going to see Tashani Doshi in India.
Every unbearable thing. Say you began as rib or clod of earth. Say you were blossoming until someone stared too long at your shirt and leaned in, unbuttoned, pushed, forced. Don't mistake me. This is not a poem against longing, but against the kind of one-way desire that herds you into a dead-end alley, and how this can lead to a weakened epidermis and despair and nights of howling, and who can you tell except mother, friend, cat, while sky keeps on being sky and streets fill with danger. Say you survive, and mostly you're okay, because turns out you can carry cauldrons of hurt and your heart is as strong as a giant carbon atom. Say you gather sisters and tell each other legends about when women were keepers of the universe, when gardens proliferated between our thighs, and even if we were hacked and scattered over the earth, temples would grow from the bits of us. Even the cosmos, seriously, the cosmos stemmed from us. In other words, we were the beginning, the origin of the world. Say all this has vanished like the great auks, those awkward, flightless birds mistaken for witches. Say those legends have gone into a kind of extinction and we have grown silent as an underground stream, and every now and again one of us would amass enough steam to plunge off a cliff like a waterfall shouting a name, and even though the noise she made was thunderous, nobody heard and she disappeared, and we did not ask where she went to or why. Heart, atom, danger, wants not to fall apart. And it is hard to say why our ears and tongues went off to be pilgrims in the valley of silence without leaving a note, or how the thorns got plucked from our throats. But now they've returned, we must make up the beds and unpack the cases. We must listen to every unbearable thing until we too can name our unbearable things, until the sound of unbearable is deafening. And it is like the fairy tale after a long spell of sleep. It is wake up, people, it is time to find our way back. Bridges are burning and towers have collapsed, and some will say the witches are returning. But really, it is the world asking to be made again. So let us bring flowers, let us bow down, let us worship and reveal our scars. Let us. Listening to Abda Parveen on loop, I understand why I miss home and why it must be so. This frugal diet of living is getting to me. Sometimes in the desert, the wind will blow through my shell-shaped ears and whisper a sea song just to taunt me. If the end game is to renounce house, mother, father, husband, sibling, succulent, child, to go in search of better hummus and woolen blankets, to choose one dog and run for the border, I'm not sure this contest was made for me. What if the dog ignores me? What if he refuses water from the tin cup I lay out for him? What if we become estranged like Enkidu, ancient wanderer, and his herd? What if my dog finds a family of wolves and abandons me? What if I felt my heart was taken out of me? I could begin each day with praise, could serve and work without once uttering the word home, could write on multiple clay tablets, could even practice hieroglyphs, the symbol for voyage, a torn out eye, falling man with blood streaming from head, Apis, Nandi, cosmic bull running into me. I would do it if it meant I could go back and everything would be as I left it. Bread on table, bowl of salt, apple tree, river and its stepping stones returned to me. What if it was better to live with radiation than with war? What if home was Chernobyl? What if the well was poisoned but the bird song made up for it? What if the ghosts of all the shot dogs went to live underground with the worms? What if you didn't wake up asking, did it all really happen to me? What if we were birds forced to spend our lives in air, to mate and sleep on the wing, to rope round and round the earth in circles and have screaming parties? What if we were never meant to settle? Would you still search out my beak midair? Would you still find me? We are homesick everywhere. Even when we are home, we are empty things that need filling. We are always lost in love, never found. Please, come find me. What if this minaret was like the last tooth in my head, unsteady and inflamed with devotion? What if I'm finally old and ready for the plant of rejuvenation, but no one's offering it to me? We're at that moment in the journey when we've hit a wall, and the only way to scale it is to use your voice with its inflections, its ditches and rough grain and longing. What if God on the other side of that wall was equally alone and in need of company? What if we replace God with home? What if I was ready to become nothing? What if I understood there was no me? Would you carry me to this divinity? Advice for Pliny the Elder, big daddy of mansplainers. I'd like you to show you the poem. It's in the shape of a menstrual cup. Great man, now that you are dead, allow me to squeeze your hand. The sage bushes in Umbria are heavy with bees, so I'm killing them with hypnosis. I am a mere woman, inferior lettuce, but I understand swoon, aka mirabilia. I fill this cup with nectar and offer it to soothe your Vesuvian wounds. I share your love of baths and classifications, and sure, if we had to point to a god in the sky, why not call him Thunderbolt? I too believe sewers are the great architectural invention. I do all my searching on roads. It has been 2,000 years, so we can forgive some of your assertions. The sea mouse who helps whales find their way by parting the brows above their eyes. The one-eyed humans and skyopods with umbrella feet, the whole exotic bestiary. If I had no mouth but could live off the smell of apples, I'd move to Kashmir. Scratch that, maybe Sussex. Once a month when the blood comes, I go out to lie in whatever field I find, to feel the scorch rise and the crops wither. Our powers are much depleted. I can stand among men in full swing of my menstruous, but nothing will dim their ability to tell me about me. There are birds at the window this morning I can't name, and dogs in the valley beyond who are using their bell-shaped lungs to announce their happiness again and again and again. Nothing has changed. We worry about the wane and winnow. In your time, perhaps the ladies used bits of cut-up smocks, but these days we have menstrual cups. Desire is still a kind of ruin. That silly bird fluttering against the window net, trying to get in, the body's steady lilt towards oblivion. They say you had a sister like Shakespeare's, mostly overlooked. That it was she who first noticed the smoky clouds which sent you on your way. Dear Pliny, I guess you never heard the one about curiosity. The cat is real. The earth never tires of giving birth. If you get too close to a volcano, you should know it may erupt. This next poem is written to commemorate the lives of the 1.5 million Indian soldiers who served in the Great War, and it uses extracts from their letters written home. Many good and wonderful things. History, too, has a hard time remembering the black waters they crossed, the small mountain villages emptied of men. Death was different then. History is always reinventing itself. Say what you will, but clouds have remained more or less the same, and leaving home is still leaving home, whether it's on a jet plane or climbing the steep path behind the house with a roll of bedding on your back. But to die in a faraway place whose name you can't pronounce for a king who isn't really yours is a sadness history still hasn't figured out. History has been pushing for republics since Lucius Junius Brutus, but men are hardy as the point or bull-headed. And you'd think the glories of lice making mansions in their shirts was a paradise they could do without. That trench living would make them walk across the front with arms held high, saying, "Take me quick, I wish only to enter the realms of God." History tries not to be sentimental, although letters give things away. One fool longed for a flute. The world is burning, but he wants to play. Others were gluttons, mercenaries, spies. The wise asked for opium, but right sweets or dainties, they said, otherwise the package might not reach. History needs to forget the dead who cover the earth like heaps of stones, who write, "Mother, is my parrot still alive? Mother, do not go wandering madly." Sometimes it feels as though the rain has been falling all your life and the girl you married will tire of tending the cattle. Do not worry. This is war where the women, like metaphors, are always steadfast and beautiful. In history's version, she sits under the peepal tree, your Victoria Cross pinned to her sari. She has been waiting since 1918 and she is waiting still. So let us speak about love the way we always have, by asking, "Have you eaten, darling? And what price did you get for the goats? And of course I miss you, but the earth is hard and the sky distant. And if I had wings, I'd fly to you." In Marseille, they said we look like kings. History cannot really say what happens to men at war, so listen. At night I feed on stars. Do not ask about the cold. They have given me whale oil for my feet, and someone told me if I carried a piece of raw onion into battle, the bullets would not find me. Pilgrimage. Every now and then the universe hands out treats. A cryogenic pod for Christmas, a family trip to Greece. We stare like pigeons at our feeders, impatient for the next gift to drop, sprouting stress bars on our feathers at the bounty of some other pigeon's trough. We were taught to show devotion by walking in circles. We had visions in caves, and when the host served an aperitif of fermented mare's milk, we drank it with grace. We walked barefoot, keeping the center to our right, measured paces between shrines and twilight. These days we take the video coach, but still bring baskets of marigold. In times of war, we go from cot to cot, whispering sweet nothings into soldiers' ears. We write letters to their beloveds and preserve their relics. Toothpick, comb, bone. How else to arrive at the ecstasy of ourselves if we cannot see another's body? The world has its unknown territories, its dragons. We wander about with blindfolds shouting, "Marco!" Only the devil responds, "Polo." It is all remembrance, to repeat and repeat again the names of what we deem holy. Sometimes we move so far we forget where we've been. It's like looking at an old picture of your face. The earth holds all our dead, all our half-eaten apples, and still it has space. We make circuits around history with lamps and portable altars of fire. Feel the thrill of ghosting in footsteps of gods and demons. Remember this hill where you were crucified? This spot in the river where you tore out your breast and flung it at the cursed city? Remember this sky you forgot in your room, confusing the blue of the screen for the cosmos within? No matter how many nights you spend in exile, remember, pilgrim, you come home to the skin. Thank you very much. My name is Tashani Doshi, and you've been listening to Poems from a God at the Door.
And as Tishani said, you've been listening to poems from her new book, A God at the Door, from India. And very appropriately, the next event in the festival will also be from India. It will be William Dalrymple actually appearing at the festival. I'd like to thank Davey Constantine and Heidi Williamson for giving such wonderful readings today. I'd like to thank also Berwick Literary Festival for hosting our reading. I think it's shown the the broad range of the kinds of poetry that Bloodaxe publishes, and I'm proud to have published these poets for many, many years, and I hope that everyone watching has enjoyed watching their readings, listening to their readings, and that you'll want to order their books. So thank you very much.